Hi, guys. How's everybody doing today? Thank you so much for tuning in with us again. We're so happy to have some of you back. If you're back for the first time coming here, we appreciate you tuning in. This is Living with Nature, the North Carolina Zoo distance learning event, coming to you from a really neat space within the zoo itself. I'd like to thank Wells Fargo for the grant funds to make this program possible for you guys. Today, it's all about international conservation. So we're going to go over the seas, so to speak. So we do programs last week, for example, or last month, on regional conservation, things that we do a little bit more locally, but we also do things across the oceans. We do some really cool stuff in Africa. We do some really neat things. We're getting ready to do some things in Asia. We do some really cool things, not just here. So trying to make a difference for our animals here and using our animals sometimes as the bridge or the connection to some of those other animals out and about. So if you come to the park, and we hope that you do, take a time to look for some of those conservation efforts too, because it's kind of cool to see that the zoo is helping out here regionally and internationally, like the programs you're going to be talking about today. And today, it's really exciting. We're actually going to Africa. We're going to the Caribbean.
Well, sort of. We're not actually taking you there, but our experts have been there before, and they will be sharing some international conservation efforts in those locations. So in that way, we are going to take you to Africa.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah, good catch, Natalie. We are going to be talking about international, not actually going there, but some of the stuff that our staff goes there. But right before we get started, once again, our teachers, when you came into the digital classroom today, you will know that your mics are muted by default. There are still ways that you can interact with us here today. You have a chat box where you can send in any questions that'll go to Linda Kenny. So everybody say hi to Linda Kenny in the background. She is also our person who's queuing stuff, pictures and videos, so you may hear us call her as well. So you'll be able to send your questions to her, and then she'll send them to the expert that is the best to answer them. We do still have those polls, so make sure you listen and watch what's going on, and so you can get those answers right and work together. And then we also have a couple of different teacher and student worksheets that you could have chosen from this time. So there were 3 different ones. There's also later something that is a little bit cool that you might be able to take part of too at school. So give us a thumbs up if you're understanding everything. Thumbs down if you're like, what's going on? I have no idea what's going on. And we'll try to help you through our time today, basically. So, yeah.
One thing you guys may realize that you might hear some background noise every once in a while. We are in the zoo, and the zoo's open today. We thought, you know what, we want to share what we're doing with whoever's around. So you may hear some car noises, you may hear some visitors walking around. So just realize that the zoo is open. We thought, you know what, it's important enough to get out there with you guys and share this information about some of the international conservation programs that we're doing with you guys and whoever sticks around for a few minutes. So we're really excited to have that happening as well. Today, as a foreshadow, we're going to do some vulture stuff, some elephant stuff, some toad stuff, and then some smart stuff. You're going to hear about that in a little bit. I think, if I'm thinking, you guys are headed somewhere,
yes,
right?
We have to go over to see some cool animals, see about some cool animals.
Well, we've got a live cool animal here to talk about. So Leslie and Natalie, we'll catch up with you guys in a little bit. Thank you so much. With me, I have a wonderful guest, another one of our experts here. This is Dr. Corinne Kendall. She's our curator of conservation and research here at the North Carolina Zoo. Corinne, welcome to Living with Nature.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Like Steve said, today we're going to be learning about some of the amazing international conservation projects that the zoo is a part of, and I get to be involved in a lot of those. So I'm very excited to share a little bit with you about what we do. And to start us off, we have a really special guest who's going to be joining us. Like Steve said, we have our animals here at the zoo who are ambassadors for the conservation that we do in the field. And so we have one of those ambassadors that's going to be joining us. So this is Jeff Souther, one of our herd keepers here at North Carolina Zoo. And with him, we have Ziggy, a black vulture. So this is actually a vulture that you can find in North Carolina and all around the United States. And I'm not blocking Ziggy.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's one of our native birds. See Jeff working pretty hard with Ziggy to make sure that she's kind of doing her thing. So a lot of the animals here are trained Oh, there she went a little high. How about that? Bouncing around. So Jeff's built up a relationship with Ziggy over time through positive reinforcement, being able to share information. And guess what? Next episode, excuse me, Ziggy. The next episode, we're going to dive in even deeper into some of the things the zoo does for the animals under our care here at the space. Bouncing her all around. So Jeff, what are you feeding right quick?
Little chopped up mice and rats, little Mises Pieces action.
Mises Pieces, that's awesome. Good stuff. And you've been working with Ziggy for a while, it looks like. She's doing great.
Just about 3 years.
Great.
So one of the things that Ziggy has, and you can see that little antenna kind of up in between the feathers, is a little backpack. And that backpack helps us if Ziggy were to fly up into the trees, we'd be able to track and find her later. And we use that same technology on vultures in the field. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute after Ziggy's done demonstrating some of her amazing animal adaptations and movement here. One of the things that you'll notice about Ziggy is as a black vulture, she's got those white wing tips or sort of white hands. If you're looking up in the sky, black vultures are quite common. That's one way to tell them apart. The other bird that you might see here would be a turkey vulture. And turkey vultures have white as a strip that's all the way down, all the way across the wings, going from one wing tip to the other. So that's how you can tell those two species apart.
Very cool. Oh, hello. So obviously, we brought Jeff, and thank you to Jeff and Ziggy so very much, out for a reason. Well, we started hinting to it a little bit. So we're doing some really cool stuff with vultures. That's, I'm going to guess, not here in the United States. Where are we doing some cool stuff?
Yeah, so vultures here in the U.S. are actually doing really well, but we are working on vultures where they are in trouble in Tanzania and other parts of Africa. And vultures are really important. They play a critical role in the environment because they eat carcasses. So a carcass is a dead animal, and vultures, by eating those dead animals, are helping to remove waste, but they're also helping to prevent disease spread. If an animal dies of something like rabies or tuberculosis, that could spread from animal to animal. But when vultures come in and they eat that dead animal, they're helping to remove it, and they also are removing that disease. They actually have a really, really acidic stomach, so they're breaking down the diseases and preventing those from being transmitted to other animals. So it's a really critical role. And one of the fun things is when I worked in Kenya, we had some of the community members there would describe vultures as being the soap of the savannah. And I think that's a really great way to think about it. They are helping to keep the environment clean. So we really, really need vultures, both here in the United States and in Tanzania and other parts of Africa, where we also are working to save vultures.
Yeah, and that's kind of important for folks to think about, that we're working in certain locations within Africa. Africa is this big, huge space, and we're working in a few of the countries in Africa to help make these guys and other animals as well, give them a little bit more of a chance of surviving. And it's neat that you guys are working with the people in Africa, in Tanzania, in Kenya, to make a difference for them.
That's right.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so you might be wondering why vultures are in trouble. And the big problem for vultures in Tanzania and in other parts of Africa, the biggest issue for them is poisoning. So sometimes the typical scenario, and we have a graphic here that we're going to put up to show you this, is that someone loses a cow to a lion or a hyena. This occasionally happens. It's very unfortunate. That cow is worth a lot of money. It's a really important food and economic resource for people that are depending on them. And so when this happens, people are very frustrated, and they might go out and sprinkle pesticides onto that cow carcass. The intent there is to try and kill the lion, and it has had a huge effect on lions as well. But as you can see in the graphic, the real victim of these poisoning events are vultures. Over 100 vultures will be killed at a single poisoning event, so it has a huge effect on the birds. And as a result, we've seen that vultures in many parts of Africa have declined rapidly. Many of the vulture species living there are considered endangered or critically endangered, and some have even declined by up to 95% over the last 30 years. So they're really in a lot of trouble.
That number is incredible. If you think about 100 vultures out there over time, you said 95, 80 to 95 of those animals are now gone. So you think about that in this broad picture, how, I mean, that's a tremendous amount of animals are just no longer there. I'll just change gears just a little bit. I love that term you said, that soap of the savannah, that cleansing, that cleaning of the space. They're eating that dead and decaying material and kind of getting rid of the diseases you said, which is really neat. I would never ever thought of that. So they can eat those things and those diseases don't come back. But it also makes really clear how the poisoning can really extend beyond just that one event. I heard a really neat quote once. I was at a conference once, and they were talking about if you want to save this, save that, and all this stuff. And finally, the people, and it sounds like it's going in Africa a little bit in some of the countries you're working in, they're saying we would love to be part of it, but we also have to take care of ourselves. Those cows are what we eat. Those cows are what we sell. Those cows are how we make a living. So I think we've got to sometimes realize that it's easy to say, save, save, save. Well, let's work with the community, as you guys are doing so very well, to make that much more possible, and maybe even more easy for the folks that live in the countries.
Yeah, so there's definitely that connection, and it works both ways. People need vultures. If we lose the vultures, we're going to have a lot of other problems and a lot of disease outbreaks. But we also need to consider what is causing people to poison in the first place and how we can resolve those kinds of conflicts that cause people to lose cows to lions and hyenas. So there's definitely a two-way street when we're thinking about conservation.
Well, I'm sure these guys are wondering, what is Corinne holding? We saw Ziggy and Jeff. Again, thanks to them for being out here, which at least have a live black vulture out here. We couldn't keep Ziggy out of it for too long. And you have a Ziggy, which has some really cool stories to tell, I'm sure. That's why you brought him out.
Yeah, so we saw Ziggy. Ziggy is about a third the size of the African vultures that I work with, and this is probably about a quarter the size. So you have to imagine the birds that I'm working with are actually about 3 feet tall. They've got a wingspan of over 6 feet, so they're pretty big, and they can weigh up to 12 to 15 pounds. So we're talking about a really large bird that's like the size of your Thanksgiving turkey.
Turkeys, yeah.
So one, like we saw with Ziggy, one of the things that we're doing is putting backpacks onto these birds. So Ziggy has a little backpack with a radio transmitter, and for the birds that we're working on in Africa, mostly white-backed vultures, we're putting on these transmitters. So this is a solar-powered satellite tag. So those are the little solar panels there in the top. And this transmitter can last several years since it's running off the sun. And it tells us where the birds are going, but it also tells us when the birds are poisoned. So if a bird dies, we get a mortality signal that tells us something's gone wrong, and we can go out and find the bird and discover where poisoning is happening. It doesn't happen everywhere. And because it's an illegal activity, people aren't always telling us that they're doing it. So we need the vultures to help us find out where poisoning is occurring. And that's what these backpacks are for. So I think we can pull up a picture now of one of the vultures that we've tagged in Tanzania. So you can get a sense of just the size of those birds. And we catch the birds in Tanzania using nooses. So these nooses are a little tangled, but they're basically little loops. So it's little loops of actually fishing line.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
All right. So we've got the first picture up of the bird being, just to give you a sense of how big they are. And then there's another picture that we have of when we've actually trapped a bird at a carcass. So at a dead animal, we've used these little nooses, these little loops, and it doesn't hurt the bird. It just catches their foot. And we go up and pick them up while they're still awake. We don't use any anesthesia. And that way we're actually able to very quickly put these little backpacks on. So I actually get to make vulture backpacks as part of my job here at the zoo. And that allows us to attach the transmitter and see where those vultures go. So it's a pretty neat part of our research in the field to get to follow vultures around. And vultures can do some pretty amazing things, as we've discovered with these transmitters. So we've had one bird that actually flew all the way from Tanzania to South Africa. That's about 1,200 miles. And what's really neat is it wasn't doing it as part of migration. So these birds are actually not migratory. It was just a young bird dispersing, so leaving its home and going somewhere new to find new food, find a new place to eat. So that bird had to fly all the way, about 1,200 miles. That would be equivalent to flying from Canada to Mexico with no road map in about a 3-week time period. So it's amazing what we've learned from the transmitters. But like Steve said, it's not just studying the birds, we also have to work with the people. And so we're pulling up another picture now of us working with some of the rangers. And so one of the things that we do is train rangers in how to handle a poisoning event so that when they are finding dead animals, they know how to take care of the ones that might be sick but haven't died yet. And also they know how to make sure they get rid of all that pesticide so that we don't have more animals coming in and consuming it. So it's a really critical role that the rangers have to play to make sure that poisoning doesn't become worse than it could be if nobody addressed it. And in addition, we also work with groups like Rawaha Carnivore Project who are helping the communities find ways to make sure that lions don't kill their cows in the first place. So we want to both address why people poison and make sure that when it does happen, we can do the best job possible to prevent the spread, because the pesticides that are being used are really toxic and can be consumed by a large number of animals. So the faster we can get those out of the environment, the better.
Cool. Well, I know for us, thank you so much for putting that information out there and working with the people in Africa and the countries of Africa to make a difference, working with the rangers, the farmers, all those people to help make a difference, everything. If I'm not mistaken, we're headed over now to another, I think we're headed over to Leslie. She is with another, one of the animals we're making a difference with. So let's shoot it over to Leslie here in a minute. She's going to tell us about some more efforts that we're using to save species in the wild from going extinct. Leslie, you around over there?
Hey everybody! Yes, we are going from kind of like a little bit of a smaller animal to a massive animal. And I am here with our the head, the director of animal health, basically our chief veterinarian, Dr. JB Mentor. And JB, we are over here.
Yeah.
Why? Why are we over by the wonderful elephants today?
Well, I wanted to show you a little bit. I wanted you to get the size of these animals.
Okay.
These animals range anywhere from about 8,000 pounds all the way up to about a 15,000 pound animal. So I wanted you to see how big they were, the immenseness of their size, but I also wanted to give you an idea of how much they eat. An animal of this size will put away a little bit of food, ranging anywhere from about 200 to 600 pounds of food per day.
Holy
Think
cow.
about that.
Wow, I knew they were massive and had to eat a lot, but that's a lot of food, 200 pounds.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that farmers' land would essentially be like a buffet to these predators. If there was an issue, I'm sure that he stepped in. What
So honestly, there was an issue. So you're exactly right. A farmer's land, when you're out in Central West Africa and you've got a lot of land and you're growing crops to feed your family, to feed the village, and an animal that comes in that eats 600 pounds of food a day, well, that's a buffet. They're going to come in. Animals and people, elephants especially, they need a lot of land. They need a lot of food. So they move in and they eat everything in sight. Now, when that's your livelihood, and everything that you do is devoted to growing these crops and feeding your land, and something comes in and eats all of your food, that's all of your money for the year. Would that upset you? Sure, it would upset me as well, especially if I'm looking to feed my children with those crops as well. So, elephants and humans get a conflict. They run into one another, and the people have become angry with having these elephants come in and raid all their crops. So just like you would if somebody was taking all of your money or taking all of your food, you'd be angry with them. So there was a conflict, and the zoo stepped in. And what we did is we needed to figure out where the elephants were, why they were coming out of the national parks, and why they were raiding these certain areas. So in 1989, the North Carolina Zoo, actually Dr. Mike Loomis, my predecessor and the former chief veterinarian, he went to Cameroon, northern Cameroon, and was working in Waza National Park. And with our collaborators with WWF, the World Wildlife Foundation, they started looking into elephant migration and throughout Waza National Park, and they wanted to try to figure out where the elephants were, when they were leaving the national park, and when they were raiding these croplands. So what they did is they put one of these things on.
Oh man.
So this is a radio collar. Woo!
I'm 5 feet.
So what Dr. Loomis did is he collared some elephants in the area in the Waza National Park, and he was able to track these elephants with this radio collar. So this radio collar sends a signal up to a satellite in space. That signal that that satellite then sends the signal back down to a computer station here in actually in France, and then my computer center over here in North Carolina, and we were able to track these elephants as they move throughout the landscape throughout the national park. Now, what we can utilize to do for that information is we can follow their migration patterns, but we can also take that information and then let the rangers know that work that map for the park, and we can say, hey, the elephants are moving out of the park, they're moving towards the farmland, they're moving towards these villages, and the rangers can then go and they can help mitigate some of that.
So, question.
Yeah.
We have these collars.
Mhm.
Did we have to collar like every single elephant that was out there, or
So,
how did that work?
so the great thing about elephants is they do work. They move in a herd.
Okay.
And it's a matriarchal herd. So there's one female in that herd. She's the matriarch. She kind of controls the herd. She's the one that's going to be directing and moving the elephants throughout their migratory pattern. So honestly, if you can get the matriarch out of the
Okay.
group, you can get the top female out of the group. She's pretty much, if you've got her collars, you've got the entire group with her. Now, bulls don't work like that. Bulls are solitary. So they're moving a little bit more independently. Sometimes they do group up in the bachelor herd, the bachelor group. So you can, if you wanted to follow the bulls, you're going to have to collar each individual bull. But most of the time, it's the larger herds that are going to do the most damage to the cropland. Because if you've got a herd of 10 to 15 to 20 elephants, up to 60 elephants moving into a farmland, they can decimate an entire crop field within a night.
That makes sense for sure. It's really interesting because like we don't have elephants over here in North America, so I'm used to seeing them as these like beautiful balls. I hope you guys heard that. Oh my goodness.
So you may be able to hear her rumbling in the background. That's a happy sound. She just found a little pile of hay over there.
I have never, guys. I've been here 3 years and I've never heard the elephants trumpet. So that's really awesome.
So that's our youngest elephant. That's Batir out there. We just had some additional elephants that come out onto the habitat with them all, and now all 4 females should be walking out into the habitat.
So if you were over in Africa,
Correct.
you would find if you had this before, basically, you would have to figure out who the matriarch was. Who's
the most dominant female in
Okay.
that group? And she's gonna, like I said, she's gonna be the one controlling the group. And they're pretty easy to pick out.
Okay.
When you're looking at a herd, she's gonna be typically up front. She's gonna be leading the group. She's gonna be directing them where they're gonna be.
Okay, cool. Well, before that really exciting moment, guys, really exciting. Like, and you can see I got really giddy with that. So, like, we see them and we think these majestic, beautiful animals, but you never think of where they live and how they affect and have conflict with people, because we don't have to do that on a day-to-day basis. So it's really interesting to hear that.
Well, I mean, what you've got is like I said, most the humans and the elephants both need land. They need food.
Yes.
The population in Africa is growing. They're migrating. They're pushing out into wild lands. They're pushing out into areas that elephants normally inhabited. So now we have to learn how to share that land with them. Again, they're really large. They're large groups of them. They eat a lot of food, as we talked about. So we're just going to have to learn how to live with these animals and coexist.
Yeah.
So knowing their movement patterns, knowing where they live, knowing their migratory patterns, and where they kind of move through, we can dictate and say, okay, you know what? Animals live in this area. Let's not put farms here. Let's not move people there.
Oh, very cool. So it's very strategic. You're able to figure out to avoid that conflict.
So again, a lot of the work that North Carolina has done, again, initially it was human elephant mitigation, but I mean, we have now collared 42 animals throughout Central and West Africa. This is in 3 different countries: Cameroon, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire most recently. And we are also utilizing this information to help these countries plan where they're going to put national parks. Probably in the mid 2000s, after culling several elephants, we were able to help the government of Cameroon dictate where they were going to put a national park called Mount Cameroon, and they were able to establish that national park by culling elephants and learning the movement patterns of where they were living.
That's really awesome. Very awesome. I had a question. Oh, so we've been doing this, you said, since 1989, correct?
1989, yes.
And since the collaring has started, have we seen like less conflict? How is that? Is it working, basically?
It is working in the areas that we are utilizing. Obviously, besides the human elephant conflict, there is all the coaching that's happening. So we're not seeing that directly helping with that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But with the collaring, we are definitely seeing some help
Mr. McCare, I have to ask,
Yeah.
are there any fun stories from Africa that you can share with us?
Yes, there are some interesting stories. Obviously, working in Central and West Africa is quite interesting. Most recently, we were in Cameroon, and again, I'm still working with Dr. Mike Loomis. He's still
Okay.
going over there, even though he's retired. He's still going over there with me. But most recently we darted an elephant, and we thought the elephant was darted and it ran off. And when it ran off, we moved down to the site and we were going to start following. All of a sudden, the bull starts charged back into where we were just at. So everybody there started scattering and we started moving around. I had hid behind a large tree as this bull elephant started running back through the group. Well, I thought it was relatively safe. The bull was ahead of me. He was overlooking to somebody else. All of a sudden, I heard some movement and some noise behind me, and 3 females came out of the woods. And I got quite scared because again, you see the size of that elephant over there, and this female, the matriarch out of that small group, came up. She chased me around the tree several times. She did end up taking her trunk and wrapping around the side of the tree, hitting me in the side of the face before I ran off to another tree. At that time, we did have a ranger with us who was able to shoot his gun in the air, which scared the group off and scare them away. Get me safe. Yeah, that's all interesting things. And there's always lots and lots of interesting things. I mean, obviously, the bugs are always a problem. Bit by a lot of ants, stung by a lot of things.
Well, it's great that the zoo is continuing to work with people to help save these majestic elephants in Africa. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we'll be heading back over to Steve, and I think we're transitioning from huge to small again. Is that right, Steve?
That's how you doing. We're getting ready to go to the Caribbean. If you look inside the room, it's all bright yellow. I got to put some booties on here. Got to get inside before I start talking to Dustin. One of the things we got to make sure we do is we're not taking any weird stuff from outside into these buildings, into these rooms. Come on in, Dustin.
So this building, it's a quarantine room, and everybody that works in this room has to put on either boots or booties, just like this one, and we also have to wear gloves because this is a conservation program where we actually take animals from this room and we re-release them back into the wild. We have to follow a lot of standards that have to do with keeping the animals under quarantine and keeping them safe from pathogens that might be in North Carolina, but also keep the animals that they will be kind of interacting with in the future safe from any kind of pathogens as well.
Cool. Well, welcome to this place. As you guys just heard Dustin talking about. You guys remember Dustin? If you guys were here last week, this is curator Dustin Smith. He's the curator of reptiles, amphibians, fish, inverts, and whatever else falls into the bucket.
All the cool stuff at the zoo, like I said before.
Nice. I love that. So you guys didn't see Dustin, but he was with us for the last segment. It was a little chillier.
Yes. It's much
outside, a little chillier. Now we're here. Where is here?
So here we're in the back of the swamp at the zoo.
Oh,
and in the back of the swamp, we have this room, and actually the room next to it dedicated specifically to this project. And this is the Puerto Rican crested toad project we have.
Okay.
Now, most people don't realize this. When you visit the zoo, you're helping conservation programs all around the world. We're learning about that today.
Yep.
But what people don't realize is that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. We have this project, we have a Virgin Island Boa project, we have a head starting project that we learned about in the last time with gopher frogs. And there's a lot like this that goes on behind the scenes. And most of that is because, like we said before, we're putting on our boots, and as I'll be getting my gloves on in a second, it's because we have to keep these guys safe from anything coming in or also from going out.
Gotcha. No, this is really neat. My guess is this space is uniquely set up for the Puerto Rican crested toads, right? So this is kind of their world.
Yeah, and kind of like you mentioned before, the climate alone is one thing.
Oh yeah.
We keep this room warm and we keep it humid. We want to simulate the kind of environment of Puerto Rico the best that we can.
Yep.
But also, as we mentioned before, it's under a concentrated quarantine. So this room actually has its own air conditioning system dedicated just to this room. This room has its own water filtration system, its own sink, its own plumbing. Everything it's kind of an isolation room to some extent. So that way we're keeping them happy, we're keeping them healthy and safe, but also we are keeping them under that constant quarantine all the time.
Nice. You guys, we get to practice this sometimes to make sure we tell all the right information. But one thing we didn't talk about, and I came in just now, I'm like, you know what? That's why I don't mean to throw you under the bus or put you on the spot. Who did this? Who built this and painted this and got it set up?
Actually, most of the zookeepers over this area did most of the work.
So our people did this.
Yeah, our people did all of it. This room was actually just a storage room. It's basically a shed that had a bunch of stuff, and it's just like your house, stuff just keeps accumulating. But we got rid of everything, moved it all outside, so we could dedicate this room to help saving its species.
Well,
So it's pretty awesome. They did pick the paint, which is a very interesting shade of bright. But also, we built the racks, we plumbed the tanks, we added the misting system. There's a misting system.
Yeah.
Every tank has UV lights, and we built it all from scratch.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
kudos to the team.
Yeah.
They would come up together with that and say, you know what? This makes it something we really need to do. All right. So you said we're going to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And yeah, we understand Puerto Rico's part of the United States, not quite international, but it's close.
Yes.
We're working on that. So yeah, we are throughout the Caribbean, and we're getting ready to do some stuff in the Philippines. There's going to be some really neat stuff over time. So bear with us a little bit, a little wink, wink to international, but it is not part of the United States that we're part of that we think of sometimes. It's kind of neat to think that we're, even though it's still United States, it's a little different.
And you said you have to go over the ocean, so
That's right.
you have to go over some water to get to Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
So
no, that makes sense. So why is this here? Why did you guys, your team, create this, and why is it not somewhere else?
yeah, that's a really good question.
What you got there? Good for me?
I think we've got some gloves. I'm gonna try to put these gloves on. These are super tiny gloves, but we'll see. We'll see what we can do. So again, back to what I was talking before, this room is isolated and we're keeping these guys safe. Now, why are we doing this? Like you just asked. We're doing that because these guys are an endangered species. In fact, according to the IUCN, which is the organization that makes the international standards, these guys are critically endangered.
Oh wow.
And that's because not only are they only found on the small island of Puerto Rico, but they are only found on a very, very small portion of the island.
Oh, no.
Literally, the only natural living population uses the exact same pond they've used for thousands, if not millions of years, and they breed in that one pond, and that's it. And so if anything happens to that pond, the species will disappear. So because of that, these guys are endangered, and we're working with them here. Our goal every single year is to pick a few of these toads from our group and put them together, breed them, so that we can send the tadpoles back to the wild in Puerto Rico. That's the ultimate goal.
So those of you that were with us last time, you said breeding this time.
Correct.
The head starting is bringing the eggs in.
Correct.
This is a true breeding program.
Yeah.
Breeding and then picking.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So every year we attempt to breed a couple of pairs. Like I said before, we usually choose about 2 or 3 pairs based on genetics.
Okay.
We put them together for breeding, and then within about 2 weeks of them laying their eggs, the eggs have hatched. The eggs hatch out quickly.
Oh, wow.
They're only in the eggs for 24 hours, and then after they hatch, we ship it back to Puerto Rico within 2 weeks.
That's cool. That's cool. So keeping that population up by things that we're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
And so, for example, I'm going to try to see if I can find a tub here where we can find you a couple of toads to look at. Now, this tub, for example, if you notice as I'm opening the tub, there's a couple different features. It's a pretty barren tank, right? There's no soil, there's no plants, and we do that because, again, it goes back to keeping them safe. We need to be able to disinfect these enclosures. Every one of these guys gets disinfected all the time. But we do have a lot of hiding and climbing structures in here for them because that's what they naturally do in the wild. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out a couple of these guys for you to see a little bit closer. I'm going to bring out a male and a female for you guys to see.
Oh,
I just have to get a good grip on them because they are a little squirmy. So
That makes sense.
a couple different things for you guys to look at. First and foremost is the size, right? So if you look at these 2 toads, the one right here is the female, and the one right here that kind of just peed on me a little bit and has been making some goofy noises, that one's a male.
Okay.
And so the male, he's doing what's called a release call. And yeah, that's this one right here. He's doing a release call. And if another male were to try to breed with him, he would make that sound so the male would know, hey, I can't lay eggs, leave me alone, you go find somebody else.
Okay.
But there's a couple other ways of telling. He doesn't have a lot of colors right now because it's not the breeding season yet. But usually when it's breeding season, his whole side of his body, his throat, and even some other parts of his body will turn yellow. He'll have a bright yellow coloration. whereas the female doesn't have that. She's kind of always the creamy color. Now, these guys are a toad, and just like the toads we have here in North Carolina, they are toxic. And they have a little tiny gland right behind their eyes right here called the parotid gland. And that's the same as our toads here, just a little bit different of a kind of toxin. And right now he's kind of puffing himself up with air, so he thinks I'm going to try to eat him, but I'm not going to do that.
No, that's not a good idea. I bet a lot of people in the States, did you guys realize that toads were toxic? They actually have a poison gland in there. It's kind of cool.
Yep. And so, again, what we would do is, and we will actually be starting this process very soon, within the next month or two, we're going to be picking a couple individuals out of these tanks for breeding purposes. And they will go into our breeding room, which is next door. And after we put them in those rooms, we'll put on a misting system. We actually play a toad call in the background to kind of simulate what they would be encountering during a rainstorm, where all the males would come down to breed. They'd be calling. And so we kind of try to simulate as much of the environment as possible so that then they start breeding.
Nice. So all this is good, and this is a ton of toads. There's so many. But let's get back to our topic of today: international conservation, things that we're doing. If I'm not mistaken, recently, and maybe I'm sure that you guys went into this, Hurricane Maria. You guys remember a couple years ago? She came through. It was a horrible event. Something through Puerto Rico made a tremendous impact, I'm sure, on these guys. So, did you guys react at all with Hurricane Maria?
Yeah, actually there were multiple hurricanes that year, but a lot they got overlooked because of the damage that was done by that particular storm. But yeah, so we have a very good relationship. I've been going to Puerto Rico to help save the species for almost 10 years now. We've got a great relationship with our partners down there as well as some locals. So we were obviously very concerned for them. And after we ensured that our partners and our friends were okay, we started asking about the toads. And fortunately for the toads, they like hurricanes.
What?
Hurricanes bring lots of fresh water, lots of rain. You know, when you're on a little island in the Caribbean, there's not a lot of fresh water. And so this particular species spends most of their lives underground or in these burrows that they live in. But yet, every time they get a really big rain event, they come out.
Sure.
So hurricanes for them are great. And in fact, during that particular hurricane, there was a big breeding event where toads didn't come out to breed. So it was good for them. It wasn't good for the locals in Puerto Rico, but I've been back multiple times since then, and the island is still struggling, but they're definitely recuperating. It's taking time, but it's looking good down there.
And I would have never thought, to be honest, that a hurricane could be good, but I mean, they're surrounded by salt water, for one. You know, it's an island, so water is really precious. The fresh water will be precious, I'm sure. So that makes total sense that they kind of replenishes or restocks some of the fresh water in the environment.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. That's kind of cool. So that's all well and good. It's neat to see that we're going down and the things are happening. You got to come checking it. It was interesting to hear that you said check on the people first, and then these guys. So that's really kudos to you guys. So what are some of the things you said they were working with some partners down there? What are some things specifically that the zoo and the partners are doing for the Puerto Rican crested toads?
Yeah, so we have a variety of projects involved with the overall recovery. So one component is what we do here, you know, where we breed the population, we manage the population. We can talk about managing the population in a minute. We've got lots of these tags on here. But in addition to this, we actually help the wild population of the toads as well. So we do surveys where we go down twice a year, every year. We survey all the sites looking for toads, documenting their populations, how their populations are doing. But then through the years, we've also noticed that their populations are not only declining, but their breeding sites are as well. So one thing we did last year that was really cool was we actually built 2 brand new wetlands for these guys. So yeah, part of what we've done is we worked with multiple partners, and we've gone out and actually dug up 2 brand new wetlands, and the toads have actually already started using them, partially because of one of the hurricanes. So that's one of the components that we have that's been really interesting. It's been kind of the habitat modification to help the species long term, not just helping them today. Long term, they'll have these brand new pools to breed in.
That's really cool. Well, I'm a little biased. I'm in the education department here in North Carolina Zoo. So I know you guys, you've been pretty proud of stuff that's been going on down there in education. Can you share with those guys kind of that side of things?
Yeah. So again, every conservation program, as you guys have heard, has to include not only helping the species, but teaching the locals and educating them as well. And so, because unfortunately, most of the locals in Puerto Rico have never seen a Puerto Rican crested toad. It is so rare, most people have never seen one. So whenever we go down, we try to teach people about the toad specifically. There is a toad that's introduced to Puerto Rico called the marine toad or the cane toad. Most people have probably heard of it because of the destruction it caused in Australia as well as Florida and many other places around the world. They're all over Puerto Rico. They have been for over 100 years. So because of that, we need to teach people that the toad they're seeing is not the one we're working with. We're trying to help with a different one, the one they will probably never see unless they visit the zoo. And so part of our program is we've created ID cards. So we distribute all around the island so people learn more about the toads. We also like to get people excited about the toads. So we might give out stickers, or we also bring baseballs. We have baseballs with Puerto Rican toads on them because Puerto Ricans love baseball.
Cool.
And who doesn't, right?
Absolutely.
So there you go. So we distribute those as well. And for special events, we have a big mascot. It's a really big Puerto Rican Crestone mascot, very well done. And anytime we visit schools, there's parades, anything at all, endangered species days, that guy comes out and visits everybody to help send the message of the toads.
That is so neat. And again, we heard from Corinne earlier today, we're actually engaging the people. So we're not kind of coming in and we're not trying to make the difference for everybody. It's because we need the help. We need the support. We need more and more help. Boots on the ground to make sure things are getting done.
Correct.
And that's so neat. You guys are able to involve the people of Puerto Rico to save their frogs, their toads. Again, it's really important.
Yeah. But yet, every single day, we still have these guys, and we actually have 40 Puerto Rican crested toads in this room that we have to take care of every single day. And, you know, we have to look at them individually, not just as a group. So you saw before when you were looking at the tubs, we have all of these cards to help us tell them apart. Okay. So this card, for example, will tell us which toad is which, because every single animal at the zoo has an identification number. And in addition to the identification number, some of them have stud book numbers. And that's how we manage the population as a whole. When I said before that we have to make sure that we have the best genetics for breeding, we look at every toad and we say, okay, this guy needs to breed with this girl in order to make sure that long-term this species is going to survive in the wild. So we help manage the population as well as the zoo's population to make sure these species will survive long-term.
That's really cool. One other thing real quick, got to wrap up in a second. But one thing you mentioned the other day is really cool, is it has little tiny tags.
Yes.
Tiffany, can you show this tag?
Yeah, so I actually brought one to show you guys. Sorry, it's in my bag here. So let me take it out so you get an idea on the perspective of it, because it is so tiny. This is called a pit tag, or also called a microchip by some people. Look how tiny that is. So that little tiny microchip or pit tag is implanted into each one of these toads. It's the same kind that you would have for your dog or cat at home, except this one's actually a little bit smaller. This one's only 8 millimeters. The ones in your dog or cat are a little bit bigger than that, more like 10 to 12 millimeters. So that way, every single toad has a tag inside of it. And so we actually just go up and scan it just like you would at the grocery store, and then you can figure out exactly which toad is which.
Nice. Cool.
We have a question.
Oh, we have a question?
How many different kinds of toads are there?
That's a very good question.
You get that one.
Yes, that's a really, really good question.
A lot.
A lot. That's all I can probably say right now, because what most people don't realize is amphibians are broken up into 3 groups of animals, right? So you've got frogs and toads.
Yep.
You've got salamanders and newts, and you've got, what's the last one? You know the last one?
Sicilians.
Sicilians. Good job. Most people don't know what a Sicilian is, but it's a type of amphibian that kind of looks like a snake or a lizard, but it doesn't have legs. It's really unique. We don't have any here in North Carolina or in the United States, so we don't touch on those too much. But of all of the amphibians in the world, of the over 6,000 species of amphibians in the world, a majority of those, about 6,000 of them, are frogs and toads. And all toads are really kind of just a type of frog. So in reality, when I say it's hard to tell, it also just depends on what you consider a frog and what you consider a toad. But I would say most amphibians in the world are frogs or toads, and that's what's most important.
Yeah. And then we're trying 6,000.
Yeah, around 6,000 of those guys, and we're trying to save many of them, not just the Puerto Rican crested toad.
They're so important. They're one of those indicator species that are living literally in the environment, transporting water and air through their skin. So these guys are going to tell us something immediately about the environment they live in.
Yep.
That makes sense. Cool. That's for sure. Good deal. So you were talking about the breeding and things like that, and the cards that we're using to make sure everybody kind of knows what's going on. So to tell them apart, we use the pit tags. This is cool. Do we do anything else health-wise for them? Is there things that we do to make sure everything's okay?
They get annual health exams. Just like you do, yeah. Just like you go and see your doctor, we take these guys to see the veterinarian every single year. In fact, just in the last 2 weeks, every one of these guys had x-rays done, radiographs done, just to make sure that everybody was doing good and looking good, and we've been keeping an eye on them.
Where did this population come from?
These guys came in from various zoos around the United States.
Okay.
Some came from, as far away as Texas, and some came from as nearby as Florida. So it just depends.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that's it for us on this side. So we appreciate Dustin, again, Curator Smith coming to us. And I believe now we're going to Africa to go on a safari.
It's warm there.
Hey everybody! Thanks so much for turning it back over to us. Yeah, we're in Africa right now. So we're actually in our Watani habitat, which is our largest habitat here at the North Carolina Zoo. We are in it, which is pretty cool. And we are joined by Dr. Richard Burgle, all the way over here on the end, and he is the Director of Conservation, Education, and Science. And so, Rich, why are we out here on our Watani habitat? Can you tell us a little bit about why this specific location?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are out on Watani because this is where a lot of our African animals live, lots of different antelope species, and perhaps most importantly for what we're going to talk about, are rhinos. I don't know if anybody can see the rhinos in the background there. There are, how many, 6 rhinos out here right now, I think?
Yes, that sounds right.
We are out here because one of the things that the zoo does for conserving animals in the wild in Africa is working on anti-poaching. It's a big problem for rhinos. Rhinos are persecuted for their horns, which something we'll talk about a little bit later. And so what the zoo has done is to help to develop a software application that helps to make anti-poaching work in national parks in Africa more effective. And that software is called SMART, which is an acronym that stands for the Spatial Monitoring and Reporting Tool. It's a bit of a long-winded acronym, and that's why we refer to it as SMART. But yeah, and so we're going to be out here talking about SMART a little bit and how we're using SMART in the wild to help protect rhinos, elephants, and lots of other species.
Very cool. So SMART, spatial monitoring and reporting tool.
That's right.
So what is it exactly? What is it reporting?
Well, so the way that SMART works is that when rangers are on patrol in a national park, so they might be out in a vehicle not dissimilar to this, driving around on the savannas of Africa, very similar to what we're doing right now. And when they're out, they see all kinds of different things that are relevant for conserving wildlife. And so they might see a rhino, or they might see evidence of some kind of illegal activity, like a bullet casing on the ground, or a person's footprint, or something like that. And what this system, SMART, allows them to do is to record all that information digitally. So they're able to take a device like this. So this is basically like a smartphone, but kind of on steroids. It's waterproof, it's shockproof, which it needs to be out in the wilds of Africa. And whenever they see these things that are interesting, like signs of illegal activity or animals, they can enter that information in here, and that information all gets stored into the device. And when they save the information, the device talks to the GPS satellites, just like your phone does. If you're using Google Maps or something like that, stores the location and the date and the time, and then that information all goes to a central database. And in that central database, then people who are managing the park, who are kind of planning the strategy for conserving all these different species, can put all that data together and do lots of different kinds of analysis in order to better plan what it is that they're doing. So they would be reporting on and analyzing things about illegal activity. So like I said, if they see if they find a snare out in the park, they'll find that snare, they'll remove it so it doesn't catch an animal, and they'll record it into the system so that people know where those threats are happening. Similarly, they'd be reporting on information about animals. So where did we see rhinos? Where did we see elephants? And so to help them understand better what parts of the park there are more threats, what parts of the park there are more animals, and then to adjust their protection activities accordingly.
So it's very strategic, which we kind of learned back with the elephants too. Like the information that we're getting, we're using it to kind of change where people are, change what's happening in certain places, which is really neat. It's not just reporting, it's not just like looking at it, it's also all of these different things, it takes like your coordination, like your coordinates, like when you put it in there, basically. So like if we were rangers here today on Watani, we'd be going and saying, okay, I saw the rhinos. I saw a female and her baby. We saw an ostrich like way over in the back over there. I also see like water buck, and putting all of that into the system so that we know what's happening where.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You could be a ranger
Oh,
already.
thank you. What about if like you don't find any evidence of poaching anywhere? Is that important as well?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and that's both for SMART and doing wildlife conservation, but also just for science in general.
Okay.
Negative data or the absence of information is still information. So if you go out patrolling around your national park and you find out that in the south part of the park there's no illegal activity happening, and in the north part of the park there's a lot of illegal activity happening, and in the north part of the park there's also a lot of animals, then you want to adjust your activities so that you're targeting the places where there are the most animals and the most amount of illegal activity in order to reduce that. Similarly, over time, you want to be looking at, are we being successful in what we're doing? Are we having the effect that we want to have? And that lack of information is actually a way to do that. So if you started off the year with finding lots of snares in one part of the park,
Yeah.
and then over time you recorded fewer and fewer and fewer, and then ideally none, that means that you're having the effect that you wanted to, and you're removing the threat to those animals, and that's being documented by using the system.
Very cool.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
so when was SMART like introduced, and how long has it been?
Well, so the North Carolina Zoo started working on a similar project in 2008, so more than 10 years ago, using these devices to record information originally about gorillas in the West African countries of Nigeria and Cameroon. We since partnered with lots of different conservation organizations, some of the biggest conservation organizations in the world, like the World Wildlife Fund, the Wildlife Conservation Society, and we all came together to create this new version of the thing that we had sort of started, and that was about 8 years ago. And ever since then, the program has really, really grown. So it started off where we were working in just a couple of parks in Africa, in Nigeria and Cameroon, focused on gorillas. But now, over the last several years, the program has grown to the point where there's now 600 different sites around the world using SMART in more than 50 different countries. It's being used in South America, it's being used in Asia, it's being used in Africa. And in fact, we just started a new project using SMART as a monitoring tool for seeing what's going on with polar bears in all the polar bear range states. So this isn't just something that's used in the savannas of Africa or Southeast Asia. It's being used all over the place to people who are responsible for helping to conserve wildlife do that more efficiently and ultimately to protect all these species we care so much about.
Very cool. What other species would you say that you've done this for? So you said gorillas kind of started with gorillas, and then now we're going to polar bears.
Yeah.
We know rhinos because we're out here in our Watani habitat. What are some other species that we've been using this SMART technology to help?
Well, another real focus of the North Carolina Zoo's work is in Southern Africa, and it's focused on big cats. So Corinne mentioned a little bit earlier the poisoning that is associated with big cats sometimes and vultures.
Yeah.
And so big cats like lions, leopards, cheetahs are also under threat. And so we've been working in a couple of parks in Zambia and Zimbabwe that are really important for big cat populations in order to, again, help the rangers to understand what's going on the ground in order to make their work more effective.
And so you guys go to Africa and help the rangers kind of learn this SMART technology so that they can, on the ground, make sure that stuff's poaching is being lessened or being more strategic about where they make their rounds. How is this provided to them? Like, do we go there and we do this for free, or we go there and they give us money for it? Like, how is this provided? How are these tools provided to the rangers there?
Sure. Well, the great thing about SMART is that SMART is completely free. It's open source software. That's been one of the guiding principles since the beginning, is that we developed this tool for the whole global conservation community. anybody can go to the SMART website. It's www.smartconservationtools.org. They can download the software. They can set it up for their national park or protected area. So it's completely freely available to anybody who's using it for wildlife conservation. In terms of who actually pays, the part of the mission of the North Carolina Zoo is to conserve animals in the wild.
Okay.
And so a big part of what we do is to help facilitate the implementation of this and other systems and all the other conservation projects we've been hearing about today. And so we partner with people working on the ground in different places to implement these projects. And so in the case of SMART, we provide all these mobile devices that people use, we provide laptops, we provide equipment for the rangers, and that kind of thing in order to help them do their jobs, which are very difficult jobs.
Yes, very
You know,
true.
out on the
I'm sure it can be very hard out there. That's really amazing that we are able to kind of provide this tool and then also provide all of the other resources for them to help make this a better conservation project, basically. I had a question and I forgot it.
That's the second time.
Did I know?
Well, we actually do have a question up here. So, how big is our herd of rhinos?
Well, we've got, I think it's 7 rhinos here. So there's 6 out on the exhibit here. There's a couple still in the background there, and one who's kind of in retirement in the back. She used to live out here, and now she's getting a little bit older. She doesn't like to hang out as much with her other rhinos, so she's in our rhino retirement facility at the back. And one of the things that's so talking about conservation and why we're doing all this work, we've got a little prop here, which is looks like a rhino horn. It's actually fake. It's not real. And there's a reason for that. And the reason why we have such a focus with this the conservation work we do in general is because rhinos are really threatened because of their horns. Rhino horn is actually one of the most valuable substances on the planet. You can sell it on the black market illegally for more per unit weight than gold. So it's a really, really valuable commodity. A real rhino horn like this could probably be sold for tens of thousands of dollars. So there's a lot of incentive for people to go out and illegally poach, illegally shoot rhinos. And that's why there's so much pressure on rhino populations, why they've been reduced so much over the last 10 or 20 years, and why it's such an emphasis to the work that we're doing in Africa with SMART and through other approaches to try to protect them because they are so threatened because of their horns. And unfortunately, the reason that rhino horn is so valuable is because there's a belief in some traditional medicines that rhino horn has medicinal properties, and it actually doesn't. Rhino horn is made out of keratin, which is the same kind of thing as your fingernails or your hair is made out of, and so it really taking rhino horn for medicinal reasons is basically the same thing as chewing your fingernails.
Which I do a lot. So then I should be very healthy, is what we're saying.
Right. Exactly. And so there's also, in addition to protecting the rhinos from poaching, from illegal killing, there's a lot of work being done to try to change people's perceptions of rhino horn, to try to educate them about how it isn't medicinal and the negative effect that it has on rhinos in the wild.
Which is really interesting because that's like a lot of what we kind of do around here. Is not just say, don't do that, you shouldn't do that. It's also educating like how we can make it better for other people, what we educate, how we can change perceptions, basically, like how we were talking about with JB about the elephant. Their conflict is something that they deal with every single day. So how we can help people get what they need, and then also make sure that we help the animals as well. So we all live here together, basically. So
That's right.
yeah. Do you have a question?
How big do their horns get?
Oh, how big do their horns get?
Well, this is actually a relatively small rhino horn. A big rhino in the wild could have a horn that was like that kind of size. So yeah, they get really, really, really big. They're used for defense, for when males are competing with females. And but they're just made out of fingernails.
One of my favorite fun facts about rhino horns is that we can tell our rhinos apart from each other based on how their horns are shaped. So they will scratch them up against things and they kind of will shape them in different ways. So each rhino kind of like
And that's, oh, so with that, and the last thing that I wanted to say was, yeah, so even though we focus on rhinos, by protecting rhinos, we're also protecting all the other animals that live in that park. So we use rhinos as a flagship, but everything else, the antelopes, the monkeys, everything else benefits. And that all connects right back here to the North Carolina Zoo. So when you visit the North Carolina Zoo, your visit helps to protect animals here in North Carolina and around the world.
Well, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, I hope everybody learned something today.
So, real quick, we have a little fun thing that we wanted to, we learned today something really awesome about our friend Natalie. We hope you have been enjoying your time at her. She is a student at Asheboro High School, and she officially got into NC State and will be going to NC State. So we're very sad that she's leaving at the end of the year. We have one more time with her, but we're very excited that she's going to be going to NC State. Yeah, it's very exciting. We're very happy. So that is all that we have today, friends. We're very excited that you were able to hang out with us, deal with a little bit of that wind. At least you're inside. It is really cold out here. We were able to take a journey on some of our international conservation today. We went with Dr. Corinne Kendall and learned about vultures and lion poisoning over in Africa. We also were able to meet Dr. J.V. Mentor and learn about elephant collaring. We were able to then see curator Dustin Smith and learn about our Puerto Rican crested toads. And lastly, with Dr. Rich Burgle to learn about our smart technology to help rangers on the ground with strategic monitoring so that they can find out where poachers are and go in and help the situation. So yeah, I hope you learned a ton today. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we were able to learn.
And we hope to see you in our next episode of the North Carolina Zoo's Living with Nature series, brought to you through generous grant support by Wells Fargo. Our next episode will be capturing the animal behavior and biology in the zoo.
Yeah. So for Natalie, Steve, and me, thank you all for coming out and being part of this. And remember to get out there and make a difference for wildlife. We are going to be showing you a video. And just so you know, there is a part that had to be censored. It's not your computer. We did it on purpose. Just keep watching it. But from us here, bye everybody.
Around the world, there is a war being fought. At stake is not a boundary or ideology, but the survival of species that will disappear if we don't act. Poachers, fueled by a global network of animal traffickers, are winning the battle. Extinction is the dark future in sight. The illegal wildlife trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry, rivaling the trades in illicit drugs and arms. The numbers tell a grim story. Tigers, 97% gone within the last 100 years. As few as 3,000 in the wild. Rhinos, 946 white rhinos killed in South Africa in 2013. A staggering 5,000% increase from 2007. Elephants, in 10 years, poaching will kill 20% of all African elephants. Turtles, pangolins, leopards, all are at risk. Across the globe, creatures great and small are being slaughtered for their skins, body parts, and for illegal bushmeat. Soon the savannas, forests, and waters will be empty as animal after animal is trapped, killed, and sold. Fighting at the front lines are the rangers, the first line of defense against poachers who will stop at nothing to continue their war on nature. All too often, rangers are outmanned, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. But we are fighting back. Around the world, conservationists, scientists, and law enforcement staff are banding together to protect our most precious natural resources. Now, a new suite of tools has been introduced into the battle, one that gives rangers and conservationists an edge in fighting poachers. It is SMART, the Spatial Monitoring and Reporting Tool. The SMART approach allows wildlife defenders to monitor anti-poaching operations and pinpoint where patrols and resources are needed most, giving them the advantage. A multilingual program, SMART simplifies capturing intelligence, deploying patrols, and understanding where the key wildlife and poaching hotspots are. By linking this information directly to the rangers that provide it, SMART empowers staff and boosts morale. Scarce protection resources are placed where they are needed, increasing the chance for species survival. The key to SMART success is getting the right information into the hands of those working on the front lines of conservation as quickly as possible. With SMART, time is spent protecting wildlife, not analyzing numbers or writing reports. Powerful and easy to use, SMART is a free, protected area management software that has been field tested and designed for those on the front line in the battle against poachers. SMART is backed by a broad coalition of conservation agencies. The SMART partnership creates a united front to fight poaching. All over the globe, SMART is already being used to stop poachers in their tracks. SMART is freely available to any individual or organization involved in biodiversity conservation. Applying the SMART approach to wildlife law enforcement will improve management of patrols, reduce poaching, and help secure wildlife populations. SMART also enforces accountability, making sure resources are used wisely. You can be a part of the solution by supporting SMART, becoming a SMART user, or joining the SMART partnership. Involvement, engagement, and financial support are needed. The war is ongoing, but now there's an ally to help rangers win the battle against poaching. Get smart about conservation with SMART.